In this video, I'm going to show you the secret to creating this beautiful, textured, abstract nature landscape that I feel like is reminiscent of alcohol inks, but with watercolor. So you're going to need some watercolor paper. You can use any kind you want, but I love these pre-cut 4x6 watercolor postcards. I'm mixing colors from my Daniel Smith primary set. I'm using 2 brushes today, a size 10 for laying down the large areas of background, and my 3 for the trees. I added some little details at the end with my CSY Metallics palette. It's an absolute mess because my 2-year-old got a hold of it and hopefully mixed them all up, but hey, they still make my pieces look extra special. And then I have some Micron pens. I wasn't sure what size I was going to use, but I ended up needing the precision of the 01. Lastly, I try really hard to use just basic paper and paint and not a bunch of extra stuff so that it's more accessible if you have limited supplies, but this design requires the use of a heat gun. They're pretty cheap on Amazon and I use it every time I paint. It's well worth the cost in my opinion. All the supplies I'll be using today are linked in the description on my storefront. The first thing we're going to do is just lay down a big area of color. I chose yellow and orangey color and green, but you can do any colors you want. We're going to need it to be super wet, and I found that it works better if the color is really diluted too. So as I'm painting just an abstract blobbish shape, I'm adding water sometimes, paint sometimes, just really saturating the area. I also did a tiny bit of splatter around it. Now comes the fun part. We start drying with the heat gun. Watercolor will fill any wet places on your paper, which is why wet on wet works as a technique. However, if an area is dry, the watercolor will not naturally fill that space and a dry line is created. Depending on how you do it, the edge of an area of watercolor when it dries can be very uneven and lacy, and it's one of my favorite things about this medium. We're essentially creating dry spaces in this very saturated area and making our own dry lines, which is why the end result has so many beautiful shapes and values. As it dries, the paint becomes thicker and darker. As you can see, it flows and shifts constantly, and I absolutely love how you're never really sure where it's going to go, and sometimes little streams drift off in random directions. I think that's part of the appeal of it. With practice, you can get even better at controlling the way it moves and shapes it makes, but even the first time I did it, when it was flying everywhere, even off my paper, it was so pretty. Once an area is dry, move on to the next color. I overlapped them a little bit, and then as I used the heat gun, it ran into the yellow even more, but that's completely okay. I think one of the reasons this kind of art lends itself so well as a naturescape is because it looks so wild and untamed, so anything goes. Now I'm going to paint some pine trees on my piece using my number 3 brush, so I want to show you a couple simple ways you can do that. The first is to draw curved lines coming out of a center stem. These are not evenly placed down the trunk, but rather kind of branch out from a few points down the middle. The lines will get longer the closer to the base of the trunk you get. Another option is just kind of gently dab your brush around the center line, once again sort of clumping the branches together in areas instead of keeping them evenly spaced. And getting larger and farther out the lower you move. This is the method I'll be using today. Now I'm going to kind of pull a landscape from this background I've laid down by finding lines that the watercolor has created and using it as ground, if you will, and place a few pine trees here or there around the piece. You can do different groupings and heights. I would definitely say less is more here. We don't want it too busy, so just a few areas with some trees will be very striking and effective. I'm going to add a deer, once again finding a good watercolor line that he can stand on. On this piece, pretty much in the middle is where it ended up, but that's not necessary. It can be anywhere. I would really recommend looking up buck silhouette on Google and copying one of your own because goodness knows animals aren't my forte. But I started out by doing a couple of ears, using my pen this time to get really good control over my lines. I fill in the area for his head and brought it down into his body, obviously really simplifying the whole thing. The antlers at the end help bring it to life. I also did some little curved lines for birds in the upper left-hand corner. This last step is completely optional, but I absolutely love adding a little touch of sparkle. I think it feels reminiscent of a geode, which fits in with the nature theme. I'm using metallic watercolor today, but you could also use a sparkly pen or gold ink, and I'm just randomly choosing some lines created by my watercolor to trace in this metallic paint. I feel like this step adds a lot of elegance and the texture that is just icing on the cake. And that is how you create this beautiful little landscape that looks really complicated and impressive, but is actually super easy to do. Play around with different colors and variations on the details that you add. It's a lot of fun. Okay, thanks for watching. Bye!